Well, let's talk about the fight, man. First of all, from your perspective, like, how good is this fight, Canelo Crawford?
It's a weird fight. It's a weird fight. And I think it has the capacity to be either, I'm not going to say really good or really bad. I think it has the capacity to be potentially historic and good, or to be what I'm going to call unsatisfying. Not a terrible fight, because you're not dealing with terrible boxers. These are still very good boxers, but it's a weird circumstance. I mean, I'll say, have you watched either of the two Netflix episodes?
I have. They're incredible. It's like a feature
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I would say that they're. You know what? I'm gonna be honest. I went in and wanted to hate on them. I was like, man,
Me too.
This is gonna be bullshit. No, they were pretty good.
And I looked at the duration. I'm like, oh, 40 minutes an episode. I don't know if I could sit through this. And then I was like sitting at the edge of my seat.
Okay, well, I don't do this for movies, but for that, I'll watch that at 1.25 speed. You kind of like, push through them a little quicker. But
yeah,
the point I wanted to make was, I didn't like only one thing about it, which was that they were trying to be like, these two have been on a collision course forever. That's simply not true, right? That's just, I mean, I get it. They're selling a fight. It's whatever. It's great programming. You should watch it, but that's simply not true. The reality is a couple of things have happened. One of which is that American boxing has declined to the point where these are kind of two of the biggest names. I realize that Canelo is Mexican, but, in serving the American audience, he's a relevant figure considered under those terms. So they're kind of like trying to put together something that doesn't really make sense, but you can put it together enough to make it usable, right? That's kind of what's happened here. In Canelo Alvarez, arguably the face of boxing, I do think that the last few years of his career have been, I would call it almost disgraceful, in how poorly he has selected opponents and how badly he ducked Benavidez. But he's never been knocked down. He has one of the most legendary chins in the game. He's a natural 68er. He has all the titles. Like, obviously, even if you discount the last few years of his career, he's a automatic Hall of Famer, right? It's just that the last chapter, Mugia was one of the better ones, but like, for example, School, the last one he had, I know it was a mandatory, but even the way he fought and the circumstances of it there were just absolutely horrible, to say nothing of the Benavidez ducking. Terence Crawford, as I mentioned, is one of the most incredible talents I've ever covered in any combat sport at any point in my life. However, he is a little bit older. 30, I think 37, 38. He is going up. They're calling it 2 weight classes, but from the Spence fight, it's 3. He did have a subsequent fight against a guy by the name of Israel Madrimov at 154, and he fought fine. But, it's 2 more weight classes beyond that. Like, this is, someone was asking me in my live chat, think of somebody who, imagine, was a really good 135er that went up to welterweight in MMA at 170 and won a title there. Because that's what you're asking this person to do, right? And that you laugh because you're like, that's insane. Imagine being a 35 champ, a 45 champ, a 55 champ, and a 170 champ. That is essentially what Crawford is trying to do. The only difference is that I think Crawford is so technically good that he can make up the difference. And the other part is that Canelo is definitely post-prime. Is that enough to tip the scales? That's kind of what this fight is about.
There was an awkward moment in those 2 episodes where Canelo's wife complains about him never being home. And Canelo's like, it gives me a chance to miss you a little more. And then they pan back to the wife and she's just like, fuck, I hate you.
Yeah. I know, it's like 2 months at a time, it's like
a we have kids, and it's funny because they put it in the thing, and there's like this music playing in the background. Switch hitter, he's incredible, like you mentioned, Crawford. He's moving up these weight classes, and a lot of people are saying, well, if he can't finish Canelo because of this weight difference and the size difference, what will this fight ultimately look like for Crawford? So when you think about how their styles match up and the fact that, this is a guy that's moving up a couple of weight classes, and, Canelo is the bigger guy. Do you think Crawford's power can translate over for him to potentially stop Canelo? I mean, this is a guy that really hasn't been stopped. Or do you think this might be a tough night once we figure out that, hey, Canelo can take these shots and now Crawford's locked in here for the long haul?
This is maybe my biggest concern. If they were the same size, I'd pick Bud every time. because to me, Bud is a better, more versatile overall pure boxer than Canelo. Um, he, to me, and I think we'll probably lean on that. I think what you should expect from Bud is to constantly find a way, not merely to take angles on Canelo, but to turn him. I think they're going to be constantly turning Canelo, in part because Canelo is by style very flat-footed. He does have good trunk movement and defense for the most part. As I mentioned, one of the most legendary chins in the history of the game.
Mm.
Not very fast or mobile with his feet. And so I think the lighter guy naturally, who can fight at angles and in turns, is going to be doing that the whole time. Get him to play catch up and then feast on him where you can leave those openings, right? Where he's turning to cover. That seems like a reasonable path, but like this is what he's up against. As I mentioned, Canelo has pretty good defense and an insane chin, and will probably be the harder puncher of the two, even if Crawford is a decent puncher at this weight with all the extra bulk that he's adding. But the problem is, one, go knock out a guy with maybe the best chin in the history of the sport, or certainly up there, right? Canelo's chin might be the most legendary thing about him beyond the accomplishment. Or you can go try to outbox him, but here's the problem. There have been many fighters who have tried that. Austin Trout to the first 7 rounds, the Erislandy Lara fight, the first, maybe even arguably the second Triple G fight. There's a few of these you could point to, and they all lost on the cards. I mean, dude, they even had, who was it, CJ Ross, when he fought Mayweather, had it a draw. Brother, I was at that fight. That was no fucking draw. Mayweather tuned him up. Like, I mean, it's fine because Mayweather's Mayweather, and Canelo was like 23, 24 in that fight. But he got tuned up. He got tuned up in that fight. So, that's what you're up against. You have to go either knock out this much heavier man with one of the most incredible chins in the history of boxing, or you have to outbox a darling to the judges throughout the course of his career. And you have to do it basically up 3 weight classes. Yeah, I mean, if anybody can do it, it's Bud Crawford. But like when I spell it out for you like that, it sounds insane, does it not?
Mm. I mean, when you break all of this down, you kind of make sense why Canelo is taking this fight, right? Like, big fight, massive on Netflix. At the same time, strategically, when you break it all down, Crawford moving up, the fact that he is a little bit older as well, like you mentioned, and all these factors for Canelo, it's also not a bad fight to take for his legacy, because a lot of fans didn't really know a lot of this background stuff for Crawford. They're just going to be watching the fight on Netflix without realizing any of this stuff. I know Max Kellerman has mentioned that, Crawford, he's picking Crawford. I've seen a lot of people say, we're picking Crawford because Canelo is a little bit past it, right? So even though Canelo is 35 years old, he's been in the game for a long time. But you mentioned it yourself. Crawford going up the weight classes. He's going to be turning 38 on the 28th of September, so that's not far away. In your opinion, who is more in their prime right now between the two fighters?
In terms of Crawford. Now, again, I don't think he's in his true prime. I mean, he's 37, as you indicated. And he's had a lot of time off. He fought one time since July of 2023 when he fought Spence. So I don't think he's in his prime either, but based on what I've seen from him more recently, which was the 2024 bout against Madrimov, he looks to me closer to his fighting prime than what we've seen from Canelo. Canelo to me looks decidedly past it. He looks to me in some cases disinterested, but in other cases a little washy. Now, you got to be careful with that, because what does that mean? Oh, again, does that mean his chin is gone? There's no evidence of that, like none. And what is he, 32, 33 numerically? But you got to remember, he started fighting pro at 15. He's been fighting grown men. And I think the biggest thing for me for Canelo is, one, some of the power hasn't been exactly there. He hasn't stopped anyone in a real long time. I mean, he's knocked down, Jermell Charlo. He knocked down Munguia. He knocked down Ryder a bunch. I think there's others as well. But he couldn't really put away hardly anybody. And in particular, down the stretch, round 7 to 12. See, that was the funny part about Mayweather. Mayweather actually was much harder to fight 7 to 12 than he was 1 to 6. 1 to 6 was your window. That was your window. You want to beat Mayweather, you got to bank those rounds because it's going to be very difficult to get any of them past round 7. Canelo is the opposite. Canelo kind of fades now because of his age, and I think, you know, the amount of abuse he's taken over the course of his life. And again, it's not like I don't understand. It's the same thing as John Jones. It's not like I don't understand cashing in and taking a fight. Hey, you know what? I want to take the mandatories that I would have skipped previously, or I want to fight guys that are totally overmatched because, you know, listen, I'm a legend in the game and I'm trying to use my own name. Cool. Drop the titles, brother. And the sanctioning bodies who are getting, you know, you didn't ask about this, but part of the reason I think they're not well regarded is they don't do their job. They have let Canelo avoid Benavidez among other problems without ever stripping him. They just let him have it. And to me, that has kind of, you know, it's destroyed something in the process. So, you know, I didn't realize you didn't ask about that, but it all kind of circles around this fight. And to me, is something to pay attention to going forward.
If Crawford pulls this off, what does this mean for his legacy?
I find it so, I mean, I know the odds don't have it this way, and there are other examples of guys going up, like Roy Jones Jr. eventually, for example, going to heavyweight or whatever. So like but to me, I think Canelo again, like, so for example, if Canelo fought Benavidez, I'm picking Benavidez 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. I think Benavidez would crush him, maybe even David Morrell. But against a guy much smaller than him, I'm not so sure. I really don't know. You know, you can argue that it makes the fight weird. You can argue it makes it intriguing, but it certainly makes the outcome a little harder to predict. I would say if Crawford can do it, to me, this would be a historic upset. I know the odds don't necessarily tell you that, but I do think it would be. Again, you're not beating the very best Canelo. That would make it truly remarkable. But you're up against so many other circumstances that it would be a singular achievement in a career full of them to do something like this. He would be he would go down as one. I mean, he already will go down, I think, also in the Hall of Fame. This would jump him several ranking spots ahead of where he's at. To do something as difficult as this is, again, what 135er do you think can beat Shavkat Rakhmonov? What 135er do you think can beat Islam Makhachev? Like, you know, it's like, what? Like, it's hard to even, or even if you don't want to say him, because, you know, maybe Canelo's not pound for pound number one, like a Jack Della Maddalena. What you think Merab can do that? You know, I don't think Merab can do that. So that's kind of what I mean. And I realize that now, you know, this is Merab several years later, having bulked up over time, but it's, you know, something like that. So in any case, I would consider it to be an enormous achievement that would put him in very rarefied air in the history of all boxers at any point.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think people don't really talk to that point about how impressive this is. Like, even in those 2 episodes, I feel like they don't want to push too much about how crazy it is him moving up these weight classes, because they want people. I honestly think, you know, it's going to be primarily a lot of casual fans watching this, and a lot of them won't even know that he's moved up. A lot of them will be like, oh, he's just fighting Canelo. They're probably in the same weight class. You know what I mean? And I feel like a part of that is they're burying the lead a little bit on that, because it's so impressive. They don't want people to be like, oh, well, why are we going to watch this fight then? You know what I mean? And and a lot of people
understand something. Understand something. He fought the last big one was I guess you called it. Okay. So he fought Spence at 47. Then that was the last of the 47 fights. Then he had one fight against Madrimov at 54. He has no fights at 60. And this will be his first fight at 68. Like, you're not against Canelo Alvarez. Like, you're not supposed to win that. I'm not saying he won't, but I'm just saying, circumstances being what they are, you should not win that fight, you know?
I just think you have a good point about the odds and stuff, because it totally doesn't take into everything that we just said. Hey, just quickly before we wrap up, we mentioned Mayweather. I saw a great post from you with a song about how you want to die. What about this? Is this like the top of the most disgraceful fights that can be made right now? Mike Tyson, by the way, people at home that don't realize, he's 60 years old. He's a 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
Signed for 2026.
Yeah.
I mean,
I you know, I know I'm old. I know that. The mirror is not unambiguous, but I just look at this and I say to myself, okay, I wouldn't hate it in a different world. But in the world that we live in, yes, we're going to get Canelo Crawford this weekend, and that's nice. But there is simply no way to look at the health of boxing in the United States and come to any other conclusion other than, wow, get the paddles out. It needs help. It needs serious help. And the fact that this is one of the bigger fights that can be made speaks to, in the United States, I mean, who knows where they might put it, but I'm assuming they're going to put it in the States. Speaks to how insanely damaged this market is. And there's a lot of factors, including, for example, the sanctioning bodies. That's a big one. Some of the fighters in the Mayweather and post-Mayweather generation actively avoiding one another. That didn't help anything. And I also don't think Saudi Arabia taking all the fights that would have been made in North America and then putting them in Saudi Arabia, including, for example, Canelo's last fight. I don't think that's helped anybody either. But whatever the reason is, and there are many of them, it's in a bad, bad place. This is, dude, think about it right now. This fight, I don't know if Netflix would want it because there's some negative connotation with Tyson on Netflix at this point, but, it would probably do a large audience. Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis is going to do a bigger number than Canelo Crawford. It's going to. Get ready for that because that's coming. And then you got Canelo Crawford, but as we indicated, two legitimate boxers in every possible way, but not even really close to each other in weight. They're kind of just, forcing it and trying to make it happen because there's not many American stars to promote anymore, or big star rivalries you can promote anymore. Dude, look at the state of things. It is in disrepair. And, I don't think the solution is allowing one firm to monopolize it. That's my opinion. But whatever the solution is, wow, life support is the state of boxing in the United States.
I just keep thinking we're going to get Nate Diaz, Connor through when they're 65.
You'll get that at the White House.
Saudi. Get that at the White House. Oh,
I mean, I'm not breaking news, but I feel like that if there's a time
Nate Diaz in there, doing his thing in the White House, I would love to see it.
I think you might see that.
Hey, you'll be doing the live watch along, I'm sure, for Canelo Crawford. One of the things I'm curious about is the production, right? Because boxing, notoriously terrible production. We saw Jake Paul did a fantastic job with the Serrano Taylor fight, the last one. It was a little bit better paced, good angles. Netflix kind of took over that. It could be good to see Zuffa have a crack at boxing, no more 3-song walkouts, stuff like that. People actually being ready to walk out.
I totally disagree. I couldn't disagree more. Well, I agree with the idea that a lot of boxing shows have bad production. That's true. A lot of them just have very small budgets. They don't have the same kind of money. Now, Netflix has more money than God. So, yes, to your point.
There's a lot when they're like, he's coming out, ladies and gentlemen. And they're like,
yes,
he's still warming up in the back. And they're like, all right, he'll be out soon, guys.
Yes. I mean, I don't like delayed broadcasts, but what I want from the game is for any sport and some of its attenuating traditions to stay in place. The last thing that I want is for the dominant aesthetics of one promoter to just color everything. And by the way, let me tell you one thing I hate about boxing broadcasts. For example, some fighter comes out and they've got a rapper from the local and the rapper is rapping on the microphone and he's barely moving his mouth. He's like, he's not even trying to lip sync. Yeah, and you're like, well, I mean, dude, kill this person. Why are they on the screen? We don't need to see it. Yes, I hate all that. But I would rather be in a world where people have the feeling that they can try something, that they can experiment, that they have a different way of looking at it, or at a bare minimum, the freedom to do different things that they want to do. And some of it will work and some of it won't. But I love the idea that when I shift away from UFC and I watch boxing, I enter a new world. And I don't like it's like traveling to a different country. I don't like every part about that country, but they do things differently over there. And I understand it. And I like it for the parts that are great. I don't want that to change, to be honest. And I think that's probably is going to change. But for me, I actually think it's one of the more endearing parts about boxing.
It's going to be interesting to see. You think it's going to look very much like a UFC broadcast, yeah? like similar
Well, I mean, that's the
angles,
thing,
but
right? The TKO, if they're like UFC or whoever is of Zuffa Boxing, if it's like UFC,
mm,
then they're going to want to retain production control. And so, what does that look like if Dana's in charge? It'll look a lot like a UFC broadcast. And to be clear, UFC broadcasts are, from a production standpoint, very clean, right? They run very orderly. All the production elements are right where they need to be. I know that there's issues with ESPN Plus, but on the UFC side, it's a well-organized machine. I don't necessarily have a problem with the way that they do it. There's some things I would change, but I don't necessarily have a problem in general with many of the way that it's a well-run broadcast. But it's their vision of a well-run broadcast. There are other visions of well-run broadcasts that you could enjoy. Again, the Jake Paul one, I thought the last one was pretty good.
it's great.
So that's what I'm hoping for, is a little bit of just a difference. That's all I want, some differences.